Someone said to me when I came into the building, if I could keep it short because they want to watch the red arrows. I choose not to be offended by that, but I saw them yesterday, so I'm going to take my time. We are coming towards the last few chapters of Mark, and it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? I've really enjoyed it. I don't know if you have. Just really digging into a book and really just focusing on getting to know Jesus more. And I've got a really big job today because not only is Mark chapter 14 like 1,000 verses long, not literally, but it's a really big turning point in the book because the first 13 chapters are an account of Jesus' public ministry, and it's spread over an approximate 3-year period. But then in Mark 14 onwards, it kind of hones down to a day-by-day and sometimes hour-by-hour account. And when I first started reading the chapter, I was really quite conflicted because I wanted you all to come away feeling connected to Jesus in a new way or feeling encouraged and built up. But the events in this chapter are really hard to read. It's an account of Jesus going through hardship after hardship after hardship. And we know that spiritually, this is the build-up to the biggest victory there will ever be when Jesus defeats death and makes a way for us to be in relationship with God. Spiritually, this is the wind-up to something amazing. But humanly, for Jesus, this is also the build-up to something horrific. In chapter 14, he is betrayed and abandoned and rejected by his closest friends, and he's arrested and accused and beaten by the synagogue leaders. And so I was thinking, how on earth can I encourage the church with this? What can we take away from the depiction of Jesus' worst day? But actually, the reality is we all face bad days. We all face tough times. Not to this scale, but we do. That's not news. You don't need me to tell you that. And actually, just like Jesus' life is an example of how to be in a relationship with God, or how to pray, or how to do miracles, how to have faith, how to be baptized, how to heal the sick, how to show compassion to people who are hurting. In Mark 14, Jesus becomes our example of how to deal with really tough times. Because we all face struggles, and some situations we can do something about. You know, sometimes we can solve the situation. We can make changes, we can take action, and it might take courage or strength or supernatural wisdom, but we can, and God helps us to do that. Other times we're in situations that we get given faith for a miraculous intervention, some healing from God, some breakthrough, provision, freedom, the kind that only God can do, that is beyond our own capacity to do. But sometimes we go through situations that, for whatever reason, we just have to go through. And God's challenged me to be really honest about this because I know about this all too well. Because the last few months, I have found things really hard. I was doing okay, and then seemingly out of nowhere, a really big, difficult thing happened, and everything kind of ground to a halt. I won't go into the whys and wherefores, it doesn't really matter, but it became clear to me that this was going to be a period where life was going to be really hard, and I was just going to have to hold on tight and take it day by day. And as I was trying to think of a way to kind of explain this to you, weirdly enough, God put a book in my mind that really explains it really well, and so I'm going to read you a quote from a book. Now, bear with me on this, because it's a very iconic piece of British literature. It's like one of the most famous. I think it's up there amongst Shakespeare and Bronte and Chaucer. It's We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Okay? Anyone who's done 0 to 4s with Becky in Bible Week, you should know what's going to happen. Becky, I'm going to do my inner Becky. I'm going to do my best. I know this is a children's book, right? This is not news. But sometimes putting things simply actually puts it really well. So I'm not going to read it in a children's voice because the children are upstairs. So it's very strange not reading this in a happy voice. It's going to weird me out. I'm sure you know the story, so I won't give you the backstory. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. Feel free to join in. What a beautiful day. Life's good. We're not scared. Uh-oh. A forest. A big, dark forest. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh, no. Got to go through it. And then you have the children stumbling and tripping and trying to get through a big, scary forest. And I know this is a children's book, okay? This is not the most profound quote I could possibly give you. But that's actually really how it felt for me. I was doing all right, I was getting on with life, and then suddenly it felt like there was a big, scary forest full of unknown and difficult things that I'm going to trip up and stumble over, and I knew that I had to get through it. But the thing is, we all have our own personal big scary forests, don't we? Things that suddenly are in front of us and make life really hard. And for whatever reason, God doesn't intervene right away, or maybe at all. And maybe in a few weeks or months or years when we've made it out the big scary forest, you're going to look back and see it in a different way. You'll see a purpose in the forest that you hadn't seen at the time. You'll see that God was in there all along and you just weren't aware of it. And it made you stronger or wiser or whatever. Which, in those weeks and months and years later, is a very wonderful thing to realize and a great testimony. But when you're in it, when it's happening now, when you don't know how it's going to play out, when you're waiting and struggling and trying to see a bigger purpose and you can't, that is really hard. So actually, I'm going to move on from the bear hunt because while it's a great source text, I prefer the Bible. Reading Mark 14 and seeing Jesus stepping into his big scary forest has been really powerful for me these last few months because it's made me appreciate what he went through for us in a whole new way. Now, it's a big chapter and lots happens in this chapter, so I can't go through everything. But if you turn to Mark 14, I'm going to kind of give you a brief overview of the whole chapter, of what happens in it. And then we'll focus in on a bit, okay? So Mark 14, it starts with Jesus being anointed by a woman with perfume. You probably know the story, which is normally only done after a person has died. And some people get annoyed because they think it's a waste of like really expensive perfume, but Jesus is grateful and he defends her, and because he knows that he's going to die. He knows what this means, what this represents. And this is kind of the starting point of that journey to the cross. Jumping forward to kind of verse 12-ish onwards, Jesus celebrates Passover. We'll later refer to this meal as the Last Supper. And he says to his disciples, to his friends, one of you is going to betray me, and it's going to lead to my death. And then he tells them that I'm going to sacrifice my blood, my body, to create a new covenant, a new relationship between God and people, which we obviously celebrate in communion now. Jumping forward, Jesus then tells his disciples that they're all going to abandon him, and that Peter will even deny having known him in the first place. But this is an aside, but what I love about this little passage is after telling them, you're all going to ditch me, he then says, after I come back from the dead, I'm going to come and find you, and we're going to be reunited. He's already forgiven them for ditching him when they haven't even done it yet. Oh, he's amazing. Verse 32, Jesus then goes to a garden called Gethsemane to pray, and he says to his disciples, pray with me, and they keep falling asleep. And even then, he doesn't get angry, but he says, the spirit is willing, you want to do it, but the body's weak, and you want to work on this, guys. He encourages them, and he teaches them through it. And then it ends, verse 43, straight after the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is betrayed, as he knew he would be. One of the people arresting him gets injured, and Luke tells us that he even heals someone trying to arrest him because he's that good. And his disciples abandon him, as he knew that'd happen. Then he's put before the religious leaders, and they try and trick him into saying something wrong, but he doesn't. And eventually they say, just tell us, are you the Messiah or not? And that's when he says, I am, which is using one of God's names, I am. And the chapter ends with Peter denying ever having known Jesus, and Jesus being beaten up and taken away to be locked up. So I think, fair to say, a really, really big, dark, scary forest for Jesus. And the majority of this eventful chapter happens in the space of about 24 hours. So lots of key moments in there. But I want to focus in on the section right in the middle where Jesus is in the olive grove, which we often refer to as the Garden of Gethsemane. So it starts at verse 32. So we're going to read it together. They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus said, sit here while I go and pray. He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He went on a little farther and fell to the ground. He prayed that if it were possible, this awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. Abba, Father, he cried out, everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. Then he returned and found the disciples asleep. He said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Couldn't you watch with me even for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you'll not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them again, and he prayed the same prayer as before. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping because they couldn't keep their eyes open, and they didn't know what to say. When he returned to them a third time, he said, "Go ahead, sleep, have your rest. But no, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here." And straight after that, that's when he gets arrested. This is a remarkable glimpse into Jesus' life, isn't it? Because it demonstrates what life as fully God and fully man looks like. Because as the Son of God, he knows his purpose, he knows his mission, he knows the bigger plan, and he loves us. He wants to be in a relationship with us. And he knows that dying on the cross and defeating death in his resurrection is the way to do it. But humanly, he knows this is going to be awful and heartbreaking and terrifying and the worst pain that you could possibly imagine. So this is Jesus in the middle of the biggest and scariest of big scary forests saying, "This is hard, God." And I think that's so important that when he prays, he doesn't put on a brave face or a holy front. And he says, "I don't want to do this. This is too hard. Please, there has to be another plan." He is honest, he is real with God about how much it hurts, about how afraid he is. He takes all his pain and his worry and his uncertainty, and he goes to his Father with it. Jesus shows us that prayer is vital when you're going through a big, scary forest. Your own private prayer, your own conversation and connection with God, your own time in his presence. And if those prayers, like mine have been, involve a lot of crying or questioning why it's happening or saying, "This is really hard, please take it away," that's okay, that's still prayer. That's still prayer. That's what Jesus did. He went and took his pain to God. Prayer is vital, and it's not just our prayers, it's the prayers of others. Jesus gets his disciples to pray too. But, his disciples are tired and it's late and he's been gone a while and they fall asleep. And he says, "Be alert, watch and pray. Do what I am doing. Be alert to what is going on. Be aware of what the situation is, both practically and physically, but also spiritually. Be aware so you don't get drawn into temptation of doing things another way or backing out. Be alert. Talk to God about it." We are in a community. If one of us is going through a tough time, we can stand with them in prayer. We can be there with them. We can be alert with them. So when they are too tired or scared or overwhelmed, we can be on watch for them. We can bolster their faith with our faith. We see it in action, don't we? When someone in our church needs prayer, we rally round, we pray with them, we stand with them. I can tell you, as someone who's been in a big, scary forest, it makes a difference. Just this week, I've had messages from several different people just telling me that they're praying for me or encouraging me, and honestly, it really matters. So when we're in a big, scary forest, God is with us in it, and prayer connects us closer to him. But when Jesus prayed in Gethsemane, what stood out to me the most was the words he said. After telling the Father how hard it was, he said, and after saying, "Please let there be another way of doing this," he then says, "Your will be done, not mine. Your will be done, not mine. Your will, your purpose, your plan, not mine. Even though this hurts, even though it's hard, even though it's scary, I trust you. I know that there are bigger things happening here, even if I can't see it right now. Even though my human wisdom and understanding tells me this is not good, I know that you can see more and you know more and you are wiser than me, and that your plans are good, and that there is something good on the other side of that forest, and that you will lead me through to it." It's like it says in the psalm that even though I walk through the valley, you are with me, and your rod and staff comfort me. I was thinking surrendering your will to his will and submitting your life to God isn't just something we do once when we become a Christian. It's something we do daily, in the big things and in the little things. And we can do it because Jesus did it first. Here in Mark 14, Jesus says, "I submit, Father, to your will, not mine." Jesus submits to the Father's will and gave up his life so that we can know God, so that we can be free from sin. We can submit our lives to God in confidence because Jesus did it first. And we can love God because he loves us first. We can surrender our lives because he surrendered his first. Jesus chose God's will over his own. He chose to fight for us rather than to fight for himself. And because he did that, we now get to choose to live life with him. Which means that he's the most trustworthy person to give our lives to because he's done it already and he's defeated death so we don't have to face it. We can give our lives to God in the confidence that our freedom has already been won because Jesus claimed it for us. So it means that when we're in our big, personal, scary forests, we aren't alone because Jesus chose to die for us despite the pain and despite the fear, despite the cost. He went through all of that alone so we don't have to go through all of this alone. Not long ago, we as a church were looking at the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11, do you remember? And they all had their own big scary forests, probably more awful than we can imagine. And it says, over and over, it says they kept going because they kept their eyes on something past the situation. Abraham, it says, looked to a city with eternal foundations. He looked to the eternal, not to the now. And it says that Moses, when faced with difficulty, it says he kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. He kept his eyes on God, not on the situation. And then later, Hebrews tells us that what Jesus looked at when going through these awful things, Hebrews 12:2 says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Jesus knew that on the other side of the pain and fear was a victory. He knew that his death and resurrection would mean that we can be in relationship with God again. And he loved us enough to endure the worst pain possible just so we can have that chance to be right with God. And so now what do? We keep our eyes fixed on him. That's the other part of Hebrews 12:2. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, we persevere on what's ahead of us. So when we're in a big, scary forest, we can make the forest our focus, the fear and the pain our focus, or we can focus on Jesus who conquered fear and conquered pain. Your will, not mine, means when I am at the end of myself, I trust that you are working. It's one of the songs we sing, isn't it? We sang it on Friday at the ladies' thing. Even when I don't see it, you are working. Even when I don't feel it, you are working. I trust that you are with me. I trust that you are guiding me. I trust that you are leading me on a safe path through this forest. And I trust that if I am in this forest, it means I'm going to come out again because your plans for me are good. I trust that one day, I will be out in open fields with the sun on my face, and I will look back at that dark and scary forest in the distance, and I say, God was there, and he brought good from that. Your will, not mine, means I am not going to give up. I'm going to hold on to you. Even if it's with just the tiniest of fingertips, I'm going to hold on to you. I'm going to give my life to you because you're good, and I trust you, and I know you're going to do good things. For me, in my forest, knowing that God has a bigger plan and purpose has been my lifeline. That there is more than this, that this forest is not my destination, it's just a place I'm passing through. Not a pleasant place, but a place I'll be in for a while and then I'll move on. And even in the forest, there have been waypoints, lampposts, if you like, that have helped me keep my eyes on Jesus. Little nudges of faith from the Holy Spirit, little reminders of God's promises, encouragement from friends, revelation from God's word, times of worship. Little beacons of hope that have lit up the path through the forest. Reading Mark 14, I am more grateful than ever of what Jesus did for me, that he died for me, that he chose this, that he chose God's will and endured all that physical and emotional suffering for me, for us, that he chose your will, not mine, so that I could know him. And because of that, because of Jesus, I can say with confidence, yes, this forest is big and scary, but I'm not alone in it. God is here, and he's guiding me, and he's giving me strength, and it's going to be okay. And that's why I wanted to encourage you. I don't know if any of you guys are facing your own big, scary forests. But if you're feeling like that, if you're feeling like I've been feeling in the last few months, this is your opportunity to go back to God and talk to him about it. Do what Jesus did. Don't sugarcoat it. Say it as it is. Tell him about it. Get your church community to stand with you in it and pray about it, and just to find Jesus in your forest.